Hello, guys. Today we're going to talk about the topic of domain and range. This is Unit 2, Section 2. Okay. And the essential questions are, how do I determine domain and range from a graph? So those are going to be our keywords, domain and range. And how do I tell the difference between a discrete and continuous functions? Okay, how do I determine the domain and range? And how do I determine the difference between discrete and continuous? So those are the main focus points of these notes. All right, moving on. Okay, first off, we're just going to look at the definitions. Okay, domain, range, just some simple definitions that you can remember. Okay, domain is always going to be your x values. All right, range is always going to be your y values. And one easy way to remember it, if you think of in the alphabet A, B, C, D, okay, D for domain comes before R, which is for range. And if you think of X, Y, Z, okay, X comes before Y. So which ones come first? D for domain, X, and R, Y for range. Or no, R for range, and Y goes with range. Okay, so that's one way to remember. Just think of the alphabet, right? But there's also, okay, your domain, your X's, those are also your inputs. Okay, so I'm going to write input. Okay, that means your Y, your range, also your outputs. Okay, and there's also independent, dependent. So domain is going to be your independent. Okay, it doesn't depend on the other value. Okay, I'll say independent values. But your Y, your range, do depend on what your domain is. So these are your dependent values. Alright, so domain is also your X, it's also your input, and your independent values. Your range is going to be your Y, your output, dependent values. So whenever it talks about either of these words, okay, just know which ones go with domain, which ones go with range. Alright, let's move to the graphs. Okay, this graph here is a discrete function. You'll notice that there are dots all over the place. Okay, it is not continuous across the whole graph, so it is discrete. Okay, and we did talk about discrete and continuous, but simply discrete. All right, you got your dots. Okay, dotted line. Okay, and those you can tell are discrete. Coordinates. Okay, they're also points. But it's not continuous throughout. It is not a solid line. It doesn't include every number. So these dots skip every 10, 20, 30, 40. They're not continuous. They don't include the numbers 1, 2, 3 or decimal numbers 0, 0.1, 0.2, 0.3. They're at certain points, okay? It's discrete. It's like trying to be discreet. You're trying to be secretive, okay? You don't want to be found out throughout the whole way, okay? If you're trying to be secretive, you're not going to tell everybody, right? Not every single person, not every single decimal. You want to be discreet, certain people, okay? Now, what is the domain of this graph? When it's a discrete function, okay, whenever it is discrete, the domain, you simply list every person you're going to tell, list every point, list every X, okay? So domain, again, is X. That means range is Y. So I'm going to list those. This is just a bracket. Our domains are going to be, I'm going to look at the graph. So our first X is 10, okay? So I go to the first point here, and I go down to where the X is and what it tells me, okay? So X, and then I go to the next point, 20. You do want to go in order, so I'm looking left to right, okay? 30, 40, 50, 60, and all I'm doing again is looking at these points and going down to what that value is. So 70, okay, this would be 80, and then the last point is 90. Okay, the biggest misconception here is you think you need to list every single X value that's labeled, but that is not the case, okay? It does not include 100. There is no point at 100. This label could keep on going to 110, 120. It could really go out to any number, any number possible, but it's just where every point is. So only look at the points, okay? Only look at the points and go to the X value and list them, okay? That's how you do discrete. For Y, your range, I'm going to be doing the same thing except going to the y. Again, you want it to do it in order, so go from your lowest point all the way to your highest, okay? So a little bracket to show that I'm listing them. Okay, so the first point here, go to the vertical line, the vertical axis, which looks about 15. The second lowest is this point. It's not the second point, it's the second lowest. We want this in order. So 25. The third point, 30. Okay, the next lowest point, 40. The next lowest point is actually all the way out here, so you do have to be careful. You want to list it in order, okay? That's 50. And then these points, okay? There's actually 2 points here, okay? But you only need to list it once. You're listing every single y value that's possible, okay? And you only need to list it once. 55 is a possible number. You can have it as many times, but you just want to know if it's possible. And 55, yes, is possible. So only list it once. Next would be 60. Okay. Let me rewrite that. 60. And then the last point here is 70. Okay. Again, you're not listing every single value there here, okay? You notice how there's a 25 here, there's a 15, okay? We're not listing all of these, okay? We're not listing the values. We're going to each point and determining what the y value is, what possible y value, what range, okay? Possible ranges are for that function, okay? And that's simply all you do for discrete functions. All right, let's move to continuous. Here's your continuous function. Now again, continuous functions are, okay, solid lines, all right? Not always straight, okay? They're not just straight lines. You see how this line kind of curves, okay? They can curve, all right, but it's solid line. Yeah, there's no breaks in between. One complete solid. This is continuous for this whole graph here, okay? So there's solid lines. You should notice that they continue, continuous, okay? They keep going. It includes not just 1 and 2, but it includes everything in between, like 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, 1.4, every single number between those, okay? It's continuous line. It's not certain dots. It's not sections, okay? It's not certain points. Every number between that, okay? So let's look at the domain. So again, this is a continuous function. And when I list the domain, it's impossible to list every single number in between, because you can go from like 0.1, then you can go from 0.1 to 0.113, every single number. It's going to be impossible to list them all, okay? So we're going to go from the lowest and the highest and say that it's all the numbers in between. So again, just look at the lowest and then look at the highest, and you want to say every number in between. And here's a hint. When you're looking at domain, okay, your eyes should really only go left to right, okay? Only look left to right. So what I mean is your x-axis here, okay, that's your x, right? That is going left to right. It's horizontal, so only look left to right. So follow the line on the graph, okay? This line here, follow the line going to your very lowest x. If I start with the lowest, that means I'm going to look to the left, because if you read the x values here, it's going down, okay, lower and lower to the left. So follow your graph, okay, to the left until you reach the lowest point, which is right here, okay? That's right here. What is that x value? Go down to the x. It's at 0. So I'm going to write a 0 here, okay? I'm just going to write a 0 first. And then you go to the right to get the highest value. So I'm going to follow my graph all the way to the right, go down to the x. It's here at 8. Okay, it'd be there at 8. And then now I'm going to say domain is x, right? Range is y. So x is between those numbers. That means my graph is going to be between 0 and 8. The way to write that, you're going to use your inequality sign. So I'm going to say less than, okay? So if you look at just this, okay, I'm looking at just this. 0 is less than x. So do you notice how the whole graph only goes to 0 and stop? Okay, so if I just read that, it says 0 is less than x. And that is true, all right? Okay, that is true. But if I look at this, well, I'm going to put another less than here. Okay, and if I look at this, now I'm saying x is less than 8. Okay, x is less than 8. So again, we're looking at just this. X is less than 8. So if I go, okay, to the right, my whole graph, it stops at 8. That is the very highest, okay? That's why we write those inequality signs, okay? But we're not done, okay? You have to look at the values at 0 and 8. Those are included. Those are closed circles. The only time it wouldn't be included, this is just an example, it's not necessarily what's happening on this graph, is when it's open. You see an open circle, okay? If it's closed in like this, you draw a line underneath. Okay, imagine if you had to complete the circle. So if you had a circle and you had to complete it by coloring it in, draw the line underneath your sign, underline your sign, okay? So if you look at this, all right, both of these points are closed in. You don't see an open circle there, so make sure you draw lines beneath, okay? Now let's look at range. Okay, range is a little different, all right, but we know the y-axis is vertical, correct? So we're only going to look up, okay, and down. Only look up and down. So if I want to get my lowest y, I'm going down, okay? It gets lower as I go down. But if I'm looking for a highest, it gets higher as I go up. All right? So your eyes should only move up and down, but follow the graph. So I'm going to find my lowest y value. So I'm going to look down. So if I follow this graph, like say I start here and I go, okay, it's going up. It's not the lowest yet. Keep going down. It's going the lowest. It is at this point. And again, we're looking at y. One of the big misconceptions, it stopped at 8 for the x value, but you're looking at y, so you got to go back here, and you know at y is 0. So your lowest is 0, okay? It is not 8. 8 is x, okay? That's a big misconception. Even though it touches this 8 here, people think we're talking about 8, but no, we're talking about the y, so you got to go to the 0, okay? Now let's look up, okay? Our eyes got to go up. Okay, it has to go up. Follow the graph. I'm going to follow the graph until it reaches the highest, which is at this point, correct? It is not where it stops over here. That is not the highest point. The highest point is up here, okay? So if that's the highest point, I'm going to go over to the y. This looks about 150, okay? Looks like it's at 150. And again, this time it's range, so we put y. Y is between 0 and 150. Again, these points are included. You would see, okay, you would see an open circle like this if it wasn't, but it's not. So since it's included, you must complete these signs, okay? Draw the line underneath, underline them, all right? And that's it for domain and range, okay? Make sure we know how to grab domain and range for both discrete and continuous, where our eyes look when we list them or when we put the range or just the numbers of the lowest and highest, all right? Thank you.